Hello, my friends. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face and my card making space. And a couple of Easter / I didn't use Easter sentiments, so they're spring cards, but they use some of the new Pretty Pink Posh Easter release. I'll post a link to the release in the description box below the video. You can check it out. Some really cute things. And I pulled out some pattern paper. Those that have watched me for a long time, if you're new here, hi, I have a thing for pattern paper. I used to use it a lot, and then I just kind of stopped for a long time. And more recently, I've started digging through my stash because I have a lot of it and using some of it. And I dug through my stash and I pulled out some pattern paper and a couple oldie but goodie favorites of mine from Pretty Pink Posh and made a couple of fringed egg cards. I don't know how else to describe them. Descriptions are not my forte. Anyway, as always, everything I used will be listed and linked in the description box below the video. My links are affiliate links. That just means that if you click on one of my links and end up placing an order, I do get a little kickback from that at no extra cost to you. That is what helps pay the bills, keeps the heaters going, the lights on, all the things. And yeah, let's jump into making these cards. So yeah, not only do I have a soft spot for pattern paper, I have a very serious soft spot for all things Doodlebug. Oh man, I have curated quite a collection. I don't hoard it. It's not hoarding, it's curating. We're professionals, man. Anyway, this is the Doodlebug floral graph paper. I honestly do not know if this 12 by 12 size is available anymore. This is what I have. It does come in a 6 by 6 size that is still available, so I will link to that. In the pretty Doodlebug colors, chef's kiss. Just Doodlebug is cutesy. I love cutesy. It works. Anywho, I actually used some of my pattern paper. I cut into it and I die cut it. So pat myself on the back. Move on with the card. So I'm using the Fringe Egg wafer die wafer die set from Pretty Pink Posh. She's released a couple other fringe die sets. There was a heart one that I did a live stream on, and if I remember, I will link to that in the end screen at the end of the video. There was also a birthday present one in the last release, which I have had sitting here. I need to use it. It's really cute. I don't know why. It's just a really cute and really easy way to add some texture. So to add even more depth and texture, I am just doing some very simple ink blending. It's not even really blending. It's more like dragging along the bottom of these die cuts just to give it that little extra something. So I'm using a variety of Simon Says Stamps Pawsitively saturated inks and my little Waffle Flower shader 1+ shader brushes, and I just stuck the die cuts to a grip mat and I dragged the color. On that one, I did an oopsie and used the wrong ink on the pattern paper, but I'll fix that because I'll just go over it with the other ink, and in the end it's not going to matter because I was going to cover up that portion anyway because I had this somewhat pre-planned in my head. So I'll have the specific ink colors listed and linked and all the things. And yeah, I did this one egg, pink, red, orange, yellow. And the other one is going to be kind of a greeny color, aqua, blue, purple. So the two of them together make a rainbow. Super fun. So yeah, that little die cut piece, that little pink one that I got the darker shade of ink on. Once I added the proper shade, in the end you barely can tell. And once the ink dries, because these inks do soften, dry back a little bit, couldn't even tell. So I just went through and did the same thing with the second set of die cuts. Because as usual, I couldn't decide. Couldn't decide on a color combo. Couldn't decide, narrow down the colors of the papers to use. So finally it's in that situation, rainbow. And since I couldn't do a rainbow of them on one, you would just have to get a little bit more technical and fussy cut the die cuts, to have more layers. It's definitely doable. But instead I just made two because that was easier. So I did the same thing with the second set of die cuts, just blending the inks, just dragging them from the little bottom portion here. And once I did that, then you just got to assemble, which super simple. Largest to smallest. That's it. no, nothing needed, you know? So I adhered everything with just craft tacky glue. If you wanted to like really build dimension, you could layer these with like thin foam squares or even like maybe some little scraps of cardstock to really just build that up. But I find with this specific, like these little fringe wafer dies, you don't really need to. All I do is just curl up the cardstock, which I'll show in a second, and that just builds dimension without creating like really any bulk. So another thing you could do too is instead of using pattern paper, or if you don't have pattern paper or just don't, you just don't have the right kinds, that's why we all hoard it, use stamps or stencils, you know? Create your own pattern paper and then die cut it. That could be really cute. And then that way you could also really customize it depending on what you're doing. That's actually what I started. I was going to use stencils, and create some patterns and then die cut. And then I was like, wait a minute. I have a large bookcase full of pattern paper. How about we just use some of it? So that's what I did. So once they were all adhered, I just gently curled up the little ends of the fringe here to give it that extra dimension and movement. And I don't know why. I think these are adorable. I'm obsessed. Anyway, then to create kind of a scene for my little eggs, I'm using the Grass Border Die, and I die cut just some green apple cardstock. And I had already trimmed down my pieces to create my scene, so I just had to run them through multiple times with this border die. And I staggered everything, so I've got the larger piece, the medium piece, and then the smallest piece, and these will get stacked together to create my little scene. And on these pieces, I also added the bit of ink blending. For this one, I used Simon's Perfection ink and one of those little waffle flower brushes. And then I'm going to adhere these layers together with craft tacky glue. So we just got this little grassy edge, and it's super cute. That's another thing I have a thing for is like grass edge wafer dies. I use them a lot, when any sort of little scene, little critters, stencil on some sky, that sort of a thing. It's like a grass edge border die comes in handy. So adhered all those layers together. And then I've got a piece of just sea glass cardstock, very light aqua cardstock. And then I used my oldie but goodie favorite, the Eyelet rectangles, and I die cut ivory cardstock from that. So then I can adhere the little scene, like little background that I'm creating to that Eyelet rectangle. And it's got the classic pretty pink Posh like stitch border around it, which I just love. I've used this wafer die so many times. I don't know. I've always been a fan of like scallop edges. I love how they look. And this one adds a little extra, the little eyelet detail, it's cute. So adhere my layers together, just like so. And then I had pulled out another oldie but goodie favorite. It was the Spring Foliage die set. And I'm going to use those with some scraps. Oh, and before I get to that, the Upright Greetings Easter set. I've mentioned this in a couple other videos because Pretty Pink Posh started releasing these are just little mini sets of Upright Greetings. I think the first one was back in the fall, something. And I mentioned it in a previous video. I'm not the biggest fan of like upright greetings, like vertical greetings for my cards because more often than not, I don't know, there's just something about them. I just don't like the look of them. But usually it's because like they're larger. It just takes up too much space. But these little ones, they're really cute. They just work. They're not too big. They're easy to tuck in. And, of course, just a cute little font. And I'm a fan. So I stamped the happy and the spring word just onto a piece of white cardstock, rotated it, stamped it a second time. And then I trimmed them into 2 little strips with my paper trimmer. And then just use my scissors to cut a little angle on the bottom of these. And then I'll come back to these at the end to add them to my card fronts. And then, yeah, Spring Foliage die set. I've used this set a few times. And again, favorite. All the little stitch details. Super cute. I only used a couple of the flowers and a couple little leaf dies from the set. And I die cut just white cardstock for the flowers. I die cut scraps of yellow cardstock for the little flower centers. Quickly adhere those together with my craft tacky glue. Just simple. And then the little leaves I had die cut from more scraps of the same green cardstock. And off camera, I had added the same ink, just quickly blended it on again, just to build that little bit of depth and dimension. So once I had all the pieces ready to go, I then adhered my little greenery bits to the larger flower. And that's going to cover up the kind of oops. But again, you can barely see it now on that little pink fringe piece. But this is also going to give me a spot to adhere my sentiments, like to tuck them in. So, and then the little flowers are they're just little cute accents, you know? So adhered everything together, and then I pop them into place onto both of these card fronts. And once I've got everything adhered, I'm of course going to add splatter. So I'm going to stick these into my splat box, and I'm going to add just a healthy dose of white splatter. So I put my white gouache on my palette. I'm going to add a little bit of water to it to thin it out a bit, just to get it to the consistency I want to get a good splatter. And I'm going to pretty heavily splatter both of these card fronts with the white gouache, because it just adds to it. Now, like I always say, do you need to add splatter? No. I know some people don't like it. That's totally okay. Like I always say, if we all liked the same things, it would be so boring. Like, not just in card making, just in life. You know, if we all liked the same things and did the same things and all of it, no fun. So if splatter's not your jam, feel free to skip it. I do encourage you to try it, though. It's fun. It's intimidating if you've never, really mucked around, that sort of a thing. Like, I found splatter to be somewhat intimidating, and now, well, look at me now, I even add black splatter, which I'm adding to this one. But it's just fun. And it's also really good for covering up mistakes or distracting the eye from mistakes. I think that's another reason why I love it so much, because it's like, oh, got a smear, dropped ink pad, whatever, add some splatter, add a die cut, we're good. So I added a little bit of black splatter, not as much, just a little bit, just a smidge, using the black gouache, thinned it out with a bit of water, same thing, and then cleaned everything off, set it all aside. And then for my card bases, they are top folding A2 white note cards, so 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. And I pulled a sentiment from the Easter Greetings set. And like I said in the intro, I didn't use the actual Easter sentiments, because this keeps it a little more open-ended, even though there's large eggs on the front. It's kind of obvious. Anyway, sometimes the mental gymnastics I do are a little hard to explain. But I stamped the sentiment on the inside from that set with the same black ink. And then I also adhered a couple of little floral die cuts, which I'll show at the end. And so once that's all done, and then the card fronts were adhered to the card bases, I then attached my little sentiment banners together. And then once they're glued together, I can trim off a bit from the top, and then I can tuck these under that little flower there, Like I said, it's just cute. It's just cute. So I'm going to tuck that into place, and then I'll repeat that on the second card. So it just says Happy Spring. And then as just a final little embellishment, nothing crazy, I used some Stardust stickles, because I mentioned that in a couple videos, somewhat recently. I started using stickles again. These are the OG. Glitter glue for adults, And if you apply it thin, it dries really quickly. If you apply it thick, set it aside and let it dry generally overnight. It can take quite a bit of time depending on your climate and how thick you apply it. But if you apply it thin like this, I just barely put any on to the flower centers, and it just gives it that little extra sparkle. And I got the pattern from the pattern paper and the splatter and the cute little die cuts. And these were a lot of fun to make. They're just cheerful, Says the girl in Saskatchewan, where we still got a ton of snow on the ground. Like, I think that's one therapy for me, making like spring-themed cards. Grass and bright colors and flowers. Love it. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Links to everything will be in the description box below. Thumbs upping and commenting helps a ton. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye. Thank you so much to my amazing Patreon supporters. For anyone that might be interested in joining my Patreon community and supporting me, the link to my Patreon is in the description box below the video. For everyone else, as always, thank you all so much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping, commenting, subscribe if you haven't, I'd love to have you. And here's a couple other videos for you to check out in case you missed them. Bye!